Welcome to Through the Eyes of Survivors. This is a podcast where we amplify the voices of those who've been silenced, whether survivors or those lost to domestic violence. My name is Tara, and I'm here to take you on a journey. And we're going to listen and learn and heal in our podcast today. Now, each episode, we're going to sit down and listen to brave individuals who have navigated their journey through domestic violence and emerged stronger for it. Their stories are here to inspire you and help us understand through the complexities and what domestic violence really entails. So, this podcast isn't just about stories, it's a call to action by leading us down a path and a narrative where you lend your ears. We can contribute to a world where we can become more compassionate and more informed about this issue. I'm Tara Woodley, your host on this journey, and this is Through the Eyes of Survivors. Welcome to Through the Eyes of Survivors, podcast that hits on topics related to domestic violence. I am your host, Tara Woodley. I'm president of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. And today I have Audrey Maltzberger with me. She is the secretary of the board of directors for Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. And Audrey has a very unique perspective today because we are going to be talking about domestic violence in the military. Audrey is a veteran and she is a 16-year advocate on this subject. So welcome, Audrey. I'm so happy to have you here.
Thanks for having me. I'm always honored to be here. Thank you.
Oh, I'm just so thrilled that we are going to talk about this topic because you and I personally have talked about this several times with your own story and everything. So I know that the military, that life is very unique for people who are living it and everything. So you had expressed that in your story that the abuse you experienced was during your time in the military and that your ex was in the military as well. So can you tell us just a little bit about that?
So I met my ex. I joined the military right out of high school. I was 18 years old. That was almost 30 years ago. And times were different back then. I feel like we live in a new time. It was really different back then. I feel like now there's a lot of advocacy, there's a lot of awareness. But I met him and we did not have a lot of support. When I met him, I thought he was my person. My parents were, like they've been together almost, they just celebrated 60 years married.
Wow.
So, and they're precious. They literally still hold hands to this day. And so when I met my ex, I thought, that was my person and that was it. I will say that being in the military was, it's a different life. The community is, the military versus civilians. So there's already that separation that's there. And I feel like that's part of what makes it so difficult as far as support.
What kind of support system was in the military back there? Was there any kind of, where you could go and report, or how did that go? How did that work?
So, obviously you report to you have your sergeants that are, above you, obviously the chain of command. I was in the military when I met him. And now throughout our marriage, I ended up, getting out of the military and staying home with my son at the time. But there is a difference between, the support system for the soldier and then the support system for the family members. That's another separation. I feel at the time that was a really big. And then we were overseas. We were separated from our families. We didn't have a lot of support system. And as many survivors that are in that kind of relationship, I never said anything.
Right.
I didn't report it, and had a situation where, somebody was called and there was, intervention, but they protect the soldier.
Mhm.
Now I'm just saying that that's what happened at the time. I'm not sure exactly if there's a, like a different breakdown now, but at the time it was, you know, they they helped the soldier, and it was different for me. The chain of command had to intervene when there was people that, there was neighbors that called because of what they heard. But the support came down the chain of command for him. There
Mhm.
was never any kind of education. It was almost like it was a very negative thing. There was no support. It wasn't, there was, the intervention wasn't that, we were going to receive support versus, he was kind of um, disciplined. It was a very
Right.
negative, they handled that very negatively.
Mhm.
So it caused problems.
Yeah, well, I can imagine. So I know this was a while ago, but it coincides with the time period that back a while ago when everything was so kept quiet about
Right.
domestic violence that and the only means of help is some kind of form of punishment or arrest, or like even out in normal society somebody is arrested, and it doesn't sound like they really provided the type of mental services that our military families really need
Right.
within the military, since what they did on that level is more of like a corrective action. You said that that actually hurt more. Can you talk about that a little bit, about what how that kind of escalated things within the home?
I feel like because it was very negative, and it affected his pay, it affected, like his file.
Mm.
It was almost because it was such a negative thing. It was really almost like it humiliated him, and so
Oh.
that made him, not very happy with me.
Mhm.
It made it difficult, but like I said, there wasn't the support there. It wasn't like they were like, how can we help? Here is our, speak to an advocate, anything like that. Now, I will say that I did as a, because I wanted to help the situation, I reached out for services for counseling for me.
Right.
Um, you know, Being in the relationship, he blamed a lot of our problems on me. So I wanted to take accountability and I wanted to help the marriage. So I did go to counseling, but it was only under the, is it guys, where it was, okay, I'll take accountability. I'm in the wrong because it was always my fault. And I tried to help by going to counseling. But, but I also want to say that because of the demand, whether it's deployment, it's really difficult to for there to have like intervention within the context of the marriage in the military, because it's the mission. It's your program. It's your life. Your whole life is the mission, and it's you have to be here. You have to do that. This is what we're doing. So it's almost like everything else is second. At least that's how I felt at the time. I don't know how it is now, but that's how I felt at that time. And it only escalated everything because we didn't have time, we didn't have support,
Mhm.
and we weren't provided resources.
It's amazing because I hear you saying, these kinds of things, if they get reported, you're affecting their promotions, right?
Right.
So, yeah, that would, I can imagine how much stress that put on it. And then, was there any kind of like, uh, like PTSD that was associated with what was happening with your house? I mean, or any services for that?
I'm really glad that you brought that up because I feel like for soldiers, and like I said, I'm a veteran also. They're often deployed, They're often separated from family and, you know, friends. And the exposure to, for example, my ex was deployed and had gone to Bosnia.
Mhm.
And the trauma that he experienced from seeing, um, you know, the different destruction, it affected him. He
Mhm.
would come home and, you know, at the same time, we were so happy to see each other. There was that the after effects of what he had witnessed and everything that he was exposed to. And it also affected him medically. You know, like people talk about post traumatic stress and, you know, how everything is internalized, but it also affects their, you know, emotional and, you know, physical well being. Is that considered high risk pregnancy because of what he had been exposed to? My two younger children, they monitored them, you know, twice as much, and that says a lot that they were monitoring the children, you know, like their pregnancies, because of what they were exposed to. Um, so it it really did make it difficult for us. Um, he came home, he was different, and it affected him. He even the stress that he was under, he had a reaction to it, and he lost his hair. And trying to connect to someone that is going through such trauma, it made it really difficult. And like I said, there was the lack of support, and we were so young.
Mhm.
We were so young at the time, you know, and being deployed and being, you know, stationed across overseas, it made it really difficult for us. It was almost like we were young, you know, we were isolated, he was deployed. There were all of these factors that just were that the odds were against us. And it makes me sad to this day. But I really I really think that if there would have been more support, things might have been different.
I guess just like with any domestic violence situation, I imagine that you took on a lot of responsibility in the manner of you could help fix this. I could help fix this problem because this is something that he endured and I can either help him love this away or get him the counseling. Or how did that work for you and the family when you tried those things?
There was just a lot of pressure watching
Mhm.
your spouse process after trauma
Mhm.
is difficult in itself. There were so many factors. It just put so much pressure on the both of us, but it almost set us up. I know it did for me because there was this. I wanted to make it better. I wanted to do everything that I could. I wanted to let him know that I was supportive of him. You know, whatever it took, I was willing to do. But it's so unrealistic because no matter what, I didn't have the tools to
Right.
help. I did not have the tools to help, and that saddens me because it was very I put unrealistic pressure and it engraved in me that I would put, you know, this pressure on myself where I was willing to do anything to help. But really, without the tools, there was nothing that I could do to help.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. My name is Tara Woodley, and I am the president of Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence. It's an organization that gives survivors and their families that have lost a loved one to domestic violence access to a community that really understands the journey that they face. We hope this episode impacts you, and whether you're a survivor or you're a family member, you may want to learn more about the topic. Hopefully, it's helping you in some way. Also, make sure you click the subscribe button below and the bell right next to it so that you can get notified when the next episode premieres. Thank you.
And hurt people tend to hurt other people. Definitely, we know that hurt people are usually the people who cause the most pain. And so, even though he was experiencing this trauma, yet he is the source of the trauma in the household. So how did that affect the children?
Right. So at the time when we were in the military, and even after I got out of the military, um, his trauma, it's hard to separate, like you said, hurting people hurt people. Most people that are healthy can separate work and home life. And when you are healthy and you've grown up in an environment where you're able to process things, you're good. But because everything was just kind of compiling on him, it made it really difficult for him to separate work and home. So he brought home his work. He brought it home with him. And it did affect my son was young at the time. He was the only one at the time. um he was a really quiet child. He didn't even know there was a child in the house, and I don't know if it was because he sensed it, but I was always making sure that my son was taken care of and quiet and taken care of, so that way I could focus on you know his dad, that way whatever needs he had. So I only imagine that sometimes the children go without because we're focusing on the spouse that needs the help, that is bringing home, their trauma with them. Did not have the tools to process. We did not have the support to be able to work through that.
Right. So, as your time as an advocate, you're talking about the tools. So, can you give our audience kind of some of the tools that you would recommend now, if they're in this situation, that are available to them?
I'm really thankful that back then we didn't have support. We didn't have the web. We didn't have Facebook. We didn't have all of the tools that we have to connect. I feel like even in that aspect, families and veterans, soldiers have the possibility of more support. We have FaceTime where they're able to see their loved ones and communicate, to have the conversations, like, are you okay? Is there anything we can do? Um, all of those things that we didn't have before, we have now.
Right.
There's so much advocacy. There are so many programs in place to help. And people, not like back then where you don't talk about it. You just kind of sweep it under the rug. It only sets us up for failure. I feel like now there's so much awareness. There's so many people having the conversations. I feel like that's the best thing that we can do for our loved ones, that are deployed, that are, because there's loneliness that happens. There's isolation. We need to be supportive of our military, of the family, also the families. Like, can I bring you a meal? Like, have the tough conversations. If you see something, I feel like we always know before we know, you
Right.
know, um, and if you feel something, have a conversation, uh, come up with a safety plan, have a code word. That's one thing that is really, really good to do, is to have a code word. That way, if you're ever in a place, and this goes clear across the board, if you're ever in a place and you need help, that you could shoot a text or have a phone call and include that word that wouldn't raise any suspicion, so that you can get help and go into safety planning mode.
Exactly. And so, I know your story personally, but for others out there, what was the deciding factor that made you decide you had to leave this relationship?
Sadly, it took broken bones for me to leave. At the end of our marriage, I think that it was over long before it was over. But I didn't know what to do, how to get help. I will say that it was my sister that was ready she suspected, she had done research, she knew where to, she was ready to help me when I was ready. And sadly, it took broken bones for me to leave. But because she had that suspicion, because she was prepared and had done the research, she was able to move into that safety planning mode. And that's what I needed, because my life fell apart, my home fell apart, my world fell apart, my children, were exposed. And I needed somebody to help me and tell me when everything just hit the fan. I needed somebody to tell me what to do and where to go. And that was the best thing that I could have ever done, because after I left, then there was intervention. Then there was the counseling, the just, going to an emergency shelter with my children and seeing, being educated about domestic violence. Like I said earlier, I thought that I could do something, but there was nothing that I could have done. We just did not have the tools. There wasn't the intervention. And I feel like me leaving and getting the help changed the trajectory of our lives. And it is because of that we are where we are today.
Right. So, I understand that during our conversation, what the military was like then, but you had told me about that you had heard some good things about where the military's kind of heading. I'm sure there's still a lot of issues within the military and their families. We want them to seek help, but um, tell me a little bit about what you had researched with the military as they're starting to take some strides, it looks like, towards domestic violence prevention.
I feel like in advocacy, we have to give people a call, like a call to act. And when I was researching, it made my heart so happy, because earlier, and on October 3rd of this year, the U.S. Department of Defense released a call for unity to end abuse. And their campaign for this year is called United Against Domestic Abuse. And I feel like that's extremely powerful, that that they would show up and release such an incredible campaign, but not only provide the resources for it. They released the numbers for the 2022 fiscal year. There were 15,479 reports of domestic abuse, and that is really high. So the fact that they would see that there was a need there and kind of call to arms, that made my heart so happy, because I feel like with what's going on in the world right now, aside from domestic violence, with everything that our military is exposed to, I feel like it's necessary, and not only this for them, but for us, just to have the advocacy to share the resources and let people know that there is help. Like if there's intervention early, your chances for success are better. It's so sad that there are so many lives that are affected by domestic violence. It's so sad that homes are broken, that families are broken. And now, with the resources that are available, I feel like we can make a difference, for our veterans.
Yes, that's awesome. So our veterans deserve so much more
Absolutely.
than what we're providing for them. So, and their families. So
Agreed.
In conclusion, if you were to give advice to someone, a woman in the military or a wife within the military who's experiencing domestic violence, what would you say to her?
I would say that there is help. There are resources. They say that as a mama, like it takes a village to raise a family, and a lot of times it's on the spouse that is left while the the soldier is deployed, or the families after the veteran returns from home, a lot of pressure is on them, but we just need to remind them that there are resources. It's okay to ask for help.
Right.
We don't have it all figured out. We're still learning. I mean, we're going to be learning our whole lives. And I just would just remind them that there is hope. Things can change. It's okay to ask for help. Lean on your family. Like I said, have the conversations. It could save a life. It could save a marriage. I really feel like us coming together and shining a light of hope for people is extremely important, because, like I said, it could save a marriage. It could save a life of a veteran or a soldier that you know, their lives are on the line every day. Of course, they deserve for us to do the same for them. And, the soldiers that are actively in the military are serving, but so are their families. One of their family members that is not there. So I feel like we really could rally together and help bring awareness, provide the resources for for the for the soldiers, the veterans, and the families.
Exactly. Amen. I agree.
We hope you're enjoying this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. We wanted to pause for a moment and let you know that Through the Eyes of Survivors has a shop now open. And this is a great way for you to not only help survivors of domestic violence, but also let everyone know that you will not be silent about this important cause. From t-shirts to bags to coffee mugs, we have so much to choose from. To grab your swag, head to our store at breakthesilencedv.org. That's store.breakthesilencedv.org. We can't say enough about how much we appreciate all that the community does to help support us and this organization. So we hope you've enjoyed this episode and continue to subscribe to future episodes. Thank you.
So, Audrey, I know part of your advocacy here, what you have done a lot of work in, is our support line and resources through the support line. So would you tell everyone out there about our support line and how that works?
Support line is so important. I love support line. There is an advocate with Break the Silence Against Domestic Violence that is available from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. Central Standard Time. Are there to be a listening ear, to provide resources, legal assistance if you need financial assistance, emergency shelter, but also just to let you know that you're not alone. I also would like to provide the phone number for the National Domestic Violence Hotline, and that is 1-800-799-7233. And for the veterans, the soldiers, and the families, I would like to provide the Family Advocacy Program information, and it is called Military One Source, and their number is 800-342-9647. They are a call center, and they do have a website. So I just wanted to share that number. You can chat with an advocate, with one of their advocates at thehotline.org.
Awesome. Wonderful. Thank you, Audrey, for coming on and talking with us and sharing your story. And we're just so grateful to have you here.
Thank you. It's absolutely an honor to be here and to represent veterans. We thank every veteran and their families for their service.
Absolutely. They are a treasure. So,
Absolutely.
well, that concludes this episode of Through the Eyes of Survivors. We please check out our support line on our website at www.breakthesilencedv.org. We have our different programs up there. You can check them out or donate. We'll provide a link in the comment sections below where you can donate to our cause and the organization. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.